Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting of Monday, March the 14th. I would now like to call tonight's meeting to order and begin by acknowledge that we are meeting on the lands of the Sooke and Shanu nations. Okay, council, turn your attention to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. I've just been advised that our delegation is unable to join with us this evening. So hopefully we will see Zero Waste Sooke at a future council meeting. So in the meantime, I'll look for the agenda to be approved without the delegation. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Logans. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. A few housekeeping items for the member of the public that has joined with us today. Just a reminder, thank you for joining, that our washroom on this floor is currently not in use, not available. So if you do need to access a facility, please reach out to one of the staff sitting closest and they will be more than grateful to take you to a facility. So apologize for that delay. And the second part is that the mask mandate, as you all know, has been eased, I suppose is the right word. However, as we do not have a vaccine passport, it would be up to the individual to decide for themselves if they choose to wear a mask or not to. So we'll just leave that with you to make that determination. Okay, council, for meeting minutes, we have our February 22nd Committee of the Whole, February 28th regular council meeting, both here for adoption as circulated. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. You have a question or a correction? Go ahead, Councillor Lajeunesse.
Two minor corrections, one on page 6.
Which meeting, the Committee of the Whole or the regular council?
Regular council, February 28th. Says Councillor Dana reported, and that's not consistent with the others. And then there's another one on page 5 where direct staff to schedule public hearing for amendment bylaw 840-690-2022. It says in favor, Councillor Bateman and Councillor St. Pierre, and no one else. So I think there we had a quorum of 2 that night, it looks like.
Okay, can you, sorry, that was in the regular meeting on page?
Yeah, page 5 of 6.
Page 5 of 6. Which item number 10.4?
Yes, the last line in 10.4.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right, it shows in favor and then it has absent. So it should be the others present, that just needs to be added there. Okay, nice catch. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Those were good. I missed that second one. Yeah, well, no, not that amazing. Not that amazing. Now in Sooke, do we have deputy mayors or acting mayors?
We have deputy mayors.
Okay,
now.
so that needs to be corrected in the February 22nd minutes in 2 places, I think. You also on page 3 of the February 28th agenda, Ms. Machada, there is a reference to Ed McGregor. That's Ed McGregor Park, and McGregor is spelled M-A-C lowercase g, our first mayor of Sooke. And there's another reference to McGregor Park on the next page, at the top of that page. You've also capitalized fireworks for some unknown reason. You've capitalized meeting right before Councillor Dana reported. So just some simple proofreading measures. Thank you.
Thank you for those, Councillor Bateman. So I'll look for a motion to approve then the amended minutes. So that's been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of approval? That's unanimous. Thank you. And councillors, just if you do see each other, if you can tell me if you 3 can pair up across, because me turning my head like this, I'm getting motion sickness from it. So you just need to indicate. I can't see you in the periphery. Just say, or maybe the open, more of an open hand is better than, pointing. It's like, yeah. And then if Ebony's doing that, then Councillor Logans, I know you're referring to Councillor McMath and so forth.
Oh, I see. So I've got
So Counselor Bateman will keep an eye on Counselor Beddoes and vice versa. Counselor Logan's in McMass, St. Pierre and La Jeunesse, because that's where sometimes I tend to notice the one side of the room over the other. Good. Thank you. Staff, it's not so much of a problem because you're right in front of me. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so item 6, please, is the report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one quick update today. I want to update council on our building permit processing. In the last 3 weeks since we started looking at this process, we have approved 40 applications and received 16 new applications. So for the week ending February 28th, we approved 12 permits and received 5 new ones. The week ending March 7th, we approved 13 applications and received 7 new that week. And for the week ending Friday, March 11th, last Friday, we approved 15 additional applications and received 4 new applications. So in the last 3 weeks, we've approved 40 applications, received 16 new applications. And as of Friday, we have 40 applications in the queue. 17 of those are in progress. That means that we have received all of the information that we need and they're going through the referral process. 18 are on hold. When they're on hold, they've been through the administrative review. They do require additional information, but they are still going through the referral process to other departments. We have 5 that we have as received. When they're received, there's in a holding pattern. There are other information that's required before they go through the referral process. So we're making huge headway. Mr. Paulo and I will be looking at those things that are on hold and received. So those 23 applications to see what we're asking for. We'll look at where we get the requirement or the authority to ask for the things we're asking for, whether it's from the building code or from our building bylaw, and that will be the basis for us to review the building bylaw and eventually bring it back to council. But things are in good shape. As I say, 40 in the queue right now as of Friday, and we're certainly approving more than we're receiving. So, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Counselor Beddoes?
Yeah, to our CAO, can we put something in the paper to that effect? Can we get that news out there that you've made that headway in the 3 weeks? I think, you know, we took quite a hit in the paper in regards to this subject twice. And I would think that would be if we could get our communications person to call up the paper and give them those stats. I'm pretty sure that they will publish them, that headway is being made. Because I'm impressed that you've cleared up that many in that short a time. And I would like to see the public know that, because they don't. So I don't know what you need for that, but I would like to see something there.
Yes, I'm impressed as well. We still do have work to do. A report will be coming back to council, but I can talk. I know that this particular week with our communications function is a very heavy week.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you give me those stats, I'll walk it to the paper myself and talk to them. And I have a very good rapport with them there, and tell them that we made that headway, and see if they will put something in the paper. If they do or don't, that's another thing, but
I'll change my chicken scratch into a bit of reporting.
yeah, just the numbers, and I'll tell the rest.
Anything to add, Matthew?
No, I'll just say that with council support with moving forward on that decision to use the surplus revenue from the building permits of 2021, our ability to bring on the building official 1 auxiliary position certainly made a huge change, as you can see with the stats that CAO McInnes just shared with council. So, you know, we're very pleased to have that opportunity to utilize those services and make huge gains in such a short amount of time.
That's a very important point, Mr. Paulo. So maybe when our CAO has a chance to email council, and then to include in there for Councillor Beddoes that the additional resources brought on was from the building permit surplus. So it's its own sort of system that's funding this to help address the problem. Like it's not just general taxes, it's specific to the building permit process, sort of taking care of itself in that way. I think that's also another important element.
Excuse me, your worship, the more we write for them, the better it is. So if you could jot something down, I'll take it down.
Understood.
Great, thank you for that, Councillor Beddoes. Councillor McMath?
I just want to follow up on an email that we got from a member of the community about the funding that we got from UBCM to investigate why the permitting system is broken. And I just wanted to hear through worship from staff on that.
So that would be the grant that we applied for and received. Mr. McInnes, did you want to highlight that?
So in 2019, there was a comprehensive study done across the province on the development, the application processing. And there were a few communities that were successful in this grant. I'm not sure how many, but certainly we were. So the idea by providing this resource is to have a number of communities go through this process and hopefully share their findings with the rest of the province, which we certainly hope to do. I hope that answers your question.
I think it's more like, what is our plans to do with the grant? To how are we running that process now that we have the grant? Is that, okay, so now that we had the grant, what are we doing it and how are we going to use those funds?
A big portion of it is to significantly increase online permitting and significantly increasing the functionality of our land-based system Tempest. And then do a process review to look at, are there redundancies in our process that we can do away with. So those are the two major things. Process review. We will be relying on other larger communities that use Tempest as well. But really investing in modules for that database that we're not using right now. The ability to apply online, do it at your own speed, not necessarily have to take the time to come into the municipal office.
And do you have a timeline on that project?
Yeah, our final report has to be into the province by September 2023.
September 2023. Okay. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Haldane was here recommending a committee or a task force of some kind. Is the feeling through you to staff that that's not required at this point?
As I said at that time, and I'll reiterate again tonight, I think it would just add time to the process right now. The time to engage the development community, in my opinion, will be through the bigger process review that we'll be doing with this grant. Right now, we really want to get through the backlog, bring the bylaw back to council on an interim basis. The final bylaw will come to council as part of this review process.
And just on that, Councillor Bateman, we do have the land use committee already established. So that's where, since that's in place, then that would be probably a better, rather than starting yet another, is to build and use the existing one that we have that's well resourced with community members. So, okay, great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, staff, for focusing on, I know it takes everyone's efforts to get us in that way. So thank you for the good work that you're doing. Okay, so that brings us to item 8, which is our consent agenda. So the motion is that item, oh, sorry, I missed a part. I'm sorry, I missed item 7 by turning the page too quickly. So item 7 is our public question and comment period. So we do for the viewing public. For the viewing public, we do have a member of the public present with us. So thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. So moving on then to item 8, again, the consent agenda. So this would be that item 8.1 be adopted by general consent. It's moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any questions? Are you withdrawing?
Yeah,
Or
I'll withdraw
something?
one item.
Okay,
And that would be item T. 20220305 for discussion at the next council meeting.
item T. Okay. So that'll be coming to, that has been, I can't speak tonight. Item, probably a good thing. Item T to be withdrawn to come forward at the next regular meeting by Councillor Bateman. Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I would have like to get a response from our chief on item B. Was mentioned briefly by myself at our last meeting, but now it's in correspondence. So I'd like to know what our regulations are with regards to fireworks and how we're addressing the correspondence from Ms. Lynn West.
Okay, and so for the chief who may not have this right on the spot, oh, he does. Oh, he does. Okay,
That was
over
the
to
heads
our
up.
fire chief.
I'd like to, sorry, through your worship, I'd like to seek out some guidance from Mr. McInnes. Him and I have had a lengthy conversation around this topic, and I do have something ready, but I don't want to speak out of turn, so we'll pass it to him.
Thank you, Chief, Your Worship. The chief has provided me a briefing note on this and the some recommendations. There is a history in Sooke on this. So I appreciate the chief turning this over to me because I really do need to go through that briefing note and understand what the recommendations are. But that will be coming forward to council eminently with some recommendations on how we deal with fireworks in our community.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll call the question on the consent agenda, please. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, item 9 is our report section. So 9.1, please. Station 1, electrical upgrades, request for quotes award.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first report in front of you is regarding the Station 1 electrical upgrades. On February 28th, 2022, the District of Sooke, as per its purchasing policy, closed its request for quotes for the construction of the electrical upgrades downstairs. And there were 4 respondents, and we are recommending that council award to Sasco Contractors of Victoria for the amount of $106,000, $761. No, you know what I mean. I can't even do it. I can't speak either today.
Okay, so we'll go to any questions for our staff. Any questions from council to staff, I meant. Questions, Councillor Lajeunesse, then St. Pierre, I believe.
Were there no local contractors bidding on the contract?
That's correct. There were locals that expressed interest in the contract, but because of our tight timelines, they chose not to bid because they were already over taxed in their work.
Councillor St. Pierre? Same question, answered. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is that council approve the award of the Station 1 electrical upgrades project to Sasco Contractors for $106,761, excluding GST for the demolitions, roughing and finishing of all electrical data and fire systems. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything on the motion, Councillor Bateman? Councillor St. Pierre? Anything from anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. 9.2, Broombusters and community broom disposal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Broombusters are a Vancouver Island-based invasive plant society who work to control Scotch broom on Vancouver Island. They're interested in coming to Sooke and working with Sooke volunteers to host events to remove Scotch broom. The District of Sooke staff, in partnership with the Sooke Fire Rescue Service as part of their Fire Smart program, would like to offer to work with that society and also offer free community broom disposal for those particular events. So what we're hoping for with council support, Parks and Environmental Services will partner with the Fire Smart coordinator to offer broom disposal during the broom busting season, which is usually end of June, well, all of June and 1st of July. Maybe that's a little late. Anywho, we will work with existing staff resources and propose opening the Public Works Yard to the public 2 days for a weekend in May. I was wrong, it is in May. And it's a great opportunity to get our feet wet, so to speak, in figuring out how to manage yard waste, for example. But we just want to start a little bit of a pilot project and have the resources of the Fire Smart people and we have some materials such as Scotch broom. So that's what's in front, or that's the end of my formal report, and I leave it for your discussion, Your Worship.
Thank you. Counselor St. Pierre?
I'm just curious about the actual process, mostly because I know that as soon as you yank broom out, especially if you yank broom out, you generally have a whole bunch of other plants showing up pretty quickly. So I was curious as to how Broombusters deals with that. Like, are they planting anything instead so that it shades it out, or what's the?
Through Your Worship, Scotch broom can be managed in two ways most effectively. So if it's larger, thicker, older broom, it's best cut at this time just before it starts to flower, or just as it's starting to flower. So not a lot of soil disturbance happens at that time. In moisture conditions, when you have smaller seedlings, that's when you would pull the Scotch broom. That's generally not what's going to be happening in the situation. It's rather going to be cut at the base. So most of this broom busting will happen either on private property or in road right of ways. And no restoration in those road right of ways is planned, but what private property owners do is going to be up to them.
This is just a follow-up suggestion or question, and that's just that I know that broom doesn't grow very well in shade. Basically, broom is eliminated when we have shade. So I don't know if we have any options in terms of right of ways where we have some control to maybe plant trees, and that would effectively eliminate. Yeah, it's weird, eh? I knew they'd get them excited. Is that an option that we might have?
It's great advice, especially depending on where the situation is. Most importantly, we would want to plant those trees in the fall when they would have the best chance of survival. So we would have to assess it on case by case basis, but yeah, we're all for planting a few trees. Agreed.
Other questions? So I have one. So this is where there's like a volunteer effort then gathers to broom bust. And then either on private land, or do you have in mind like some of our parkland? Is there any, I'm thinking of where the sport box is going might be a location, or otherwise is there an issue in our parks or where?
So those details haven't actually been flushed out. Once your support,
Okay.
we'll figure those things out, but you're exactly right. There's many Sooke parks that would benefit from some broom removal. And we might, at that stage, with your support, do a call for volunteers to manage those spaces. It's year one, but so there's plenty of potential.
Well, this is great because it'll even just help folks identify the plant and what to look for in a seedling state or even more established, and actually have a place to get rid of it. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, so I guess Broombusters has been coming to Sooke for a number of years now and working on Whiff and Spit, I think. Is that right?
Through your worship, that's the Juan de Fuca Community Trail Society that's been doing this. This is a different society.
Okay. And I guess the key here is that if a private landowner has cut the broom, they definitely have to get it to the works yard, because otherwise it becomes a fire hazard.
That's correct. It is a fire hazard when left unattended. So people can compost it on site and chip it up or take it to other disposals, but the disposal options are limited in Sooke. Some soil companies aren't receiving it. So we intend to bring it to the works yard, have it desiccate for a couple of months in carefully kept piles, and then have it chipped and just either disposed of or composted on site.
And in terms of notifying local haulage companies and providing, I guess we'll look in the Lions phone book. Yeah.
We're expecting the homeowners will bring it themselves to the public works yard, but we haven't worked out those details for making sure that we're not overrun with Scotch broom.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful program. And just from the fact that if you ever see in a bushfire in my neck of the woods, that broom is what goes first, and then it goes to the crowns of the trees. So the more of it we can get rid of, the better. But I usually cut it off, put a bit of Roundup on it, but we can't do that. So used to. No, I'm really happy to see that program come in. I think it'd be very good for us.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council support Broombusters invasive species work in Sooke by allowing volunteers to install roadside signage, and that council direct staff to organize broom disposal at the municipal works yard at 27B Caltassin Road. By Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any comments, Councillor McMath is the mover, Councillor Beddoes?
I have a broom puller if anybody needs one.
All right, we can sign you up on the day of. Thank you. Councillor Beddoes is volunteering. Okay, any other comments from? Okay, no, I think this is exciting and thank you, Ms. Hooper, for coordinating this. And you're right, it's a good pilot just to see how it all works at the works yard and what sort of other, other types of services we can look at adding on into the future, but it's a good way to get going. Absolutely, thank you. I'll call the question then, all in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. The next up is 9.3, Communities in Bloom participation.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide council with information to consider to whether or not participate in the Communities in Bloom program in 2022. This report provides 4 options for council to consider when making their decisions. For background, for those who have not been part of the Communities in Bloom program, the District of Sooke has participated in Communities in Bloom for a number of years. And we received the honor of 5 blooms in 2012, 13, 14, 16, and 18, and 19. We've done it for quite a few years and done very well. We've registered as friends, which means non-competitive years, in 2015 and 2021. Retaining the 5 bloom status requires a great deal of work. It took a lot of work to get to 5 blooms, and it takes even more to retain that 5 bloom status every year. So much so that it's estimated that it costs staff about 450 hours to plan, organize, and put on the event every year. And given the fact that we can't register as a friend again, we're faced with the question of whether to fully participate again this year. Traditionally, it's not always, the Communities in Bloom program is supposed to be administered by a local community group, and it's not supposed to fall primarily to the District of Sooke staff. But that's what's happened over the evolution of the program. And we do a good job at it, but as I mentioned, it does take quite a bit of time. So the options in front of council today are to either identify a community organization that can assume all of the duties related to Communities in Bloom and support them perhaps with a grant or something to host the event. Another option is to direct us to make time in our schedule and accommodate this project. And the third option is not to participate in Communities in Bloom in 2022. So I will leave that with council to decide, but it is important to remind you that it does take a great deal of time, and Parks and Environmental Services, as with the rest of the organization, really do enjoy hosting these programs. It gives us a really great chance to sit back and assess and rest on our laurels a little bit and celebrate what is great in our community. But we do struggle with the balance of the icing, so to speak, that is on our cake. And so I will leave that with council.
Thank you, Ms. Hooper, for bringing this forward. I do feel it's a very valuable program because of what it does and just what you learn through it. I used to sort of think that it would almost be a way to do almost some of our annual report or like a progress check-in, because it shows where it's not just about flowers, like it is around sustainability, everything from how we're fueling our fleet, sustainable development patterns, how to make trail, highlighting a lot of wonderful things, but it is a lot of work to do. I just feel it would be unfair to put it on our park staff this year, because we have a sport box that we're trying to not fire up, but get ready and open to the public. We're coming out of COVID. It'll be curious to see what the demand looks like on our parks and trails and amenities as we are coming out of the pandemic. I still think they've been discovered. They're going to be loved and used. We have a dog park that will be opening up for the public. So there's the pieces of what's working and what isn't working with all of it because it's all new, right? So there's going to be some concerns and queries that are going to emerge from these items. It's unfortunate not to maintain that friends category though. So I'm sort of leaning to items 1 or 3. It's just how do you mobilize a group on short notice? Councillor Logans?
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. I have limited brain power these days, so I'm trying to figure out, the deadline is March 31st, but what is sort of the timeline or deadline for the projects to occur?
Normally, through your worship, even though the deadline's at the end of March, we don't host the judges until usually mid-July. So there's plenty of time to organize events, develop the photo book, and there's a profile book that we also do. That's where the time comes. And it's not just Parks and Environmental Services staff, it's corporate services, communications. It's the whole organization that gets involved in that preparation.
Having said that, actually, perhaps you could answer my next question, Ms. Hooper, through your worship, which would be if this were passed on to a community organization, would they be able to take on all 450 hours of this project, or like how much would they actually realistically be able to help with?
Through your worship, there is a municipal presentation that always has to happen by municipal staff and a tour that is usually done with municipal staff as well. So I would estimate that probably about 350 hours of that would be the potential group, and that 100 hours would probably remain. It's the profile book. It's all of these things. Additionally, through your worship, the profile book needs a lot of municipal information as well. So it's really hard to hand that over very easily and save a lot of time.
Thank you. A specific organization doesn't come to mind for me in particular, but it could be nice to, and maybe not this year, perhaps another year, even just put a committee together that could help with this. I think we might have discussed that last time, but it might have just fallen by the wayside there, but I'm willing to help out in any way that I can to make it happen. It would be a shame to have to set it aside for this year, especially coming out of COVID. It's a really nice, fun thing for us to do. So it might be a bit of a balance, but I think it's worth doing.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I would definitely tend towards option number 1. And the thing that occurs to me is that there's a lot of community groups that could actually use, for example, a coordinator position to help in their activities, but where that position could potentially be paid for through a grant in order to manage this entire process. I think that most of them would struggle with human resources unless they actually moved in that kind of a direction. But you could potentially look for someone that had exactly the right sort of skills to pull together a Communities in Bloom presentation, but also act as a coordinator for other activities in the group. And that could be a win-win, both for our organization and theirs. I'd be interested in seeing if our staff can actually find an appropriate group, because as Councillor Logans has pointed out, I'm not sure who that would be. I know that previously when I was doing some work on a food policy council, we had a group whose name unfortunately escapes me, that was very active in gardening and had a lot of volunteers. And it'd be interesting maybe to figure out who that group was. I feel so bad about that, but I think there are appropriate groups that might be out there.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, there was a group a few years back. My neighbor was the president of it. Again, I can't remember the name exactly, but I think with COVID, they sort of went underground and defunct. And it's going to take them a year or so to come up to speed again because their executive was shut down and all that. So it might be pretty tough to do it this year, but we could find an organization hopefully by next year, but we would lose that 1 year in between and then fall out of the system. And I remember, well, I guess 3 years ago, you arranged for a boat and we took them out in the harbor. I learned more about our harbor on that boat trip than I ever knew before, thanks to our park staff. But it's very worthwhile, but I don't know we're sort of in a catch-22 with this coming out of COVID, but it's, I am concerned about staff overload. I mean, they do some wonderful things, but there is a limit. And another 400 or 500 hours on staff time might be a little concerning.
I think that's the challenge with a lot of our organizations out there right now is because of the disruption. They also now are sort of planning, okay, now we need to bring everybody back. And in some cases, some volunteers are right there ready, and others have moved on, moved away, or picked up other interests or have other things that they're focused on right now. So that's kind of the challenge is now it's, when it even planning for Canada Day has already started for a 1 day, there's a lot that happens at Canada Day, but it's also already in the works. Whereas here it's, okay, now we have this and we need to give it to some, like, there's a lot of heavy lifting that happens with this program, but Councillor Beddoes is correct, because you do learn a lot. Certainly I did, which is why those books are so helpful in terms of the work that we're doing as a municipality. In some ways it is the case, I think we did, because that was sort of what I heard the last time was like, you're doing an excellent job. However, it does belong with the community. It's meant to be community run, not sort of our municipality doing it. So it was the case of we need to form a committee that does this. And sometimes it was connected to the SPA committee and others. They certainly have played a role, I think, in the past. So then it was the case of, okay, where does this land, and almost forming that so that they have time. Whereas I think now it just feels like it would be a rush to do it. And all, like so many of the organizations are dealing now with, okay, we're out of this, now what? And how do we, we want to do this or this. And we have our own events that we want to get up and running that they're trying to pull their volunteers into doing, which is what we want them to do. So then to say, okay, we're going to add this to your plate, even with a grant, that's a big ask, I think. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah. So I like this idea of a committee, but Ms. Hooper mentioned rests on our laurels. We have got 5 blooms for 6 years so far. So I mean, this is, I don't know what the phrase is, but it's like this will go on and on and on into the indefinite future of an annual commitment. So perhaps we could take a pause this year and then get a committee formed a little earlier in the year. I guess the 450 hours, you could always take the 2019 profile book and just update it, right? So that's wouldn't necessarily be as daunting for that committee as it appears. So I'd recommend option C for this year. And yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Bateman is making that motion then that council provide direction to staff on option C. Option 3, which is not to participate. So I think the motion would be that council, I'm just trying to think of this, provide the, because it's like, well, that doesn't work. The language doesn't fit. That council not directs. I can't do this. The council advised staff that we are not participating in 2022.
That sounds good.
Okay, that's moved and seconded by Councillor Bateman, or pardon me, St. Pierre. Councillor Bateman has moved it. So would you like to speak to your motion?
As I say, we have participated how many years now? At least 10. And we've had 6 years of 5 blooms, and 2023, 24, 25, they're all ahead of us. And we're coming out of a COVID period, and there's war in Ukraine, and maybe we can, again, rest on our laurels.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I would agree with all of that, but I would also like to, I don't know, it's probably a friendly amendment, but it was suggested that we need a community partner. The group, the organization itself has suggested a community partner. If we're going to take a year off, I think we should be finding those community partners. And I think the funding that was previously set aside for communities in Bloom should potentially go towards assisting those community partners and reestablishing them post-COVID so they can assist us with the communities in Bloom, so that next year we're fully ready, partners available, we're good to go.
Yeah, Can you turn off your microphone?
Sure can.
Counselor Beddoes.
Yeah, I would just like to, when you send the letter to them, I assume you will send some communications, that you cite that due to recently coming out of the COVID restrictions, our local community groups are not likely to be up speed this year. And that way they might, give us a pass and count all our years in the past. The second thing is I can, if staff wants, I can talk to my neighbor and see if there's, I don't think it'll happen this year, but talk to her. She's quite a gardener and see what groups are available and advise you if there is any. So I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, I think just the piece I would add would be that if we have some way of recommending to the next council, like this is an important program for many of the reasons that council stated today. It showcases the work we're doing. It's an opportunity to learn about the community, to be proud of what we're doing, to kind of show how we've come. Like that's in terms of sustainability, like that, you just learn so much about what we're doing in that way. So it's almost a recommendation forward to the next council. Like, don't just shrug this off. Like there's a lot you can learn here, and we recommend you form a committee, you identify community partners, allocate some funding and get the ground running as sort of part of a priority there. And then I think this year it's the case, it's just to pause for applause and just to acknowledge the work that has taken place in our community. We often like, okay, let's get on to the next one. And we don't sit back and say, wow, look at all of this. And there's been tremendous work that's been done. Even what I've learned on how we manage rodenticides or not have to use rodenticides and do proactive pest control treatment. That's something to be proud of because other communities are struggling with that right now. So there's even those elements there that I think are important. So thank you for all of this, Ms. Hooper, because it has been a lot of heavy lifting to get to this point. And I think it might have started out of the museum even once upon a time with Alita Pierce championed the idea many years ago. So it is something to be proud of that we don't want to lose. It's just finding a way to get it back on track again. Councillor St. Pierre.
In terms of what I was suggesting, do we need to add to the existing as an amendment or further motion or?
How can we capture that piece?
I would suggest you take the vote on the current motion and then make a secondary motion to perhaps direct staff to bring back the 2023 program during budget. And I think that should get it in front of the next council.
We can do a business arising then. Okay. The only thing with this motion I don't like is the word not, but I don't know how else to wordsmith that. Direct staff to, you're right, it's just, it's a negative, right? So I just, okay, I'll leave it, I'll get over it. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous, thank you. So I think the business would arising would be that council direct staff to bring forward the Community in Blooms, the 2023 Communities in Bloom program during the budget, the next budget deliberations. Perfect. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre. Oh,
Discussion?
well, that has to be moved first to get on the floor.
Okay, moved.
Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
I'm curious as to whether or not the next budget cycle will offer a community group enough time to get themselves going and to really familiarize themselves with the program and be a good partner, or whether we should be maybe moving a little bit more quickly towards identifying those partners and supporting with money that's already available through our budget existing.
If I'm not mistaken, though, our budget deliberations start in the summertime in July.
That's a good point.
So I think we're okay.
Yes, I think we're okay, Your Worship. And I think there's a couple of groups that are poised well for this. Sooke Garden Club, their membership is growing. I happen to know a young lady that writes an article in the paper periodically. And the Philharmonic that do the garden tour. I think those are two that are great. And of course, the spa committee is still constituted and ready to go. So yeah, I think that through the service level discussions that will start in July, I think we'll have time enough to get a community group on board, or at least see if there's any desire from one of those three to participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think the Philharmonic is also not doing the Secret Garden Tour this year. right? Yeah, so they're focusing all efforts on getting the fling up and going as well as the concert series. So again, it's a case of just trying to pick up things and focus on them. Excellent. I had someone reach out to me saying that she was looking to get involved in something. So be like, hey, you know, there's this great program and what better way to get to know your community? Okay, that's fantastic. So this has been moved and seconded. Did we call the question on this? No. Okay, so I'll do that now. All those in favor, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Hooper. Wonderful to see you in chambers tonight. Okay, our bylaws section is up next. 10.1 bylaw number 842, the revenue anticipation borrowing.
Thank you, through your worship. Nothing further to add to this report. It's this annual bylaw that is required from our banking institution of CIBC. And it's just a bylaw that is required in case cash flows become an issue for the district in regards to collecting property taxes. So this will allow the district to borrow up to $7.4 million if for some reason cash flows weren't received in time. And then the money would need to be paid back as soon as property taxes have been received. So it's just asking for the first 3 readings. And that's it.
Any questions from council? Okay, so so we'll now move that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 842, 2022. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any comments, Councillor St. Pierre? Councillor Logans? Anyone else? All those in favor then, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, there is no new business this evening. So that brings us to correspondence requiring action. So 12.1, removal of Telus Payphone and Sooke. Councillor Bateman.
Okay, so I looked through these correspondence packages and there's all sorts of interesting directions we could go and discuss, and we largely don't bring things forward. So this one struck me as a particularly notable moment in communications history, the last payphone in Sooke being removed from outside of the Pharmasave in Cedar Grove Mall. And so according to recent Statistics Canada report, 93% of BC households have a cellular phone. And that still leaves 7% who do not. And in a small town with a big heart, this concerns me a little. So I did talk to the gentleman who wrote us, Andy Rasimas, which is undoubtedly a butchering of his name, but he told me there were about 1,800 payphones left in BC. Many of these are in the Metro Vancouver area. There are 3 that are operating in Victoria. There's a payphone in Jordan River and a payphone in Port Renfrew. This one, and most of them have been turned into calling card and collect call only phones. They don't, because coin jams were a continuing issue. That was the #1 cause of vandalism. In fact, people have been known to take away the entire booth and use it for scrap aluminum. So so Telus, obviously they'd be happier if they were all removed. It costs about $7,000 for Telus to install a payphone, and it's entirely up to the landlord. A lot of them were at 7-Elevens and gas stations, but vandalism, the illegal nature of the calls, customers being harassed and hassled, and so they were being removed from those obvious public locations. So I've reached, the letter asks us to contact the business wireline team of Telus Business Solutions. So I tried on Friday and was put into some sort of call hold nightmare scenario. I finally reached someone after about 50 minutes of waiting and listening to their music, which was unbelievable. Anyway, he told me he couldn't help me. He had a heavy act. I don't know where he was coming from, but he put me back into the system, and that's what. So I've now written their communications executive, And they haven't got back to us yet. But there is possibilities, I think, at the Hope Center. Because our homeless population are one of the target groups for payphones. And the Shelter Society tells me that their clients often rely on free phones wherever they can find them. Apparently, the Sooke Family Resource Society has a phone and the library has a phone. Anyway, that's just my report. I guess I can report back on what I hear from the Telus people. And I've touched base with the Hope Center and also with the thrift store, because I think that might be a good spot for a payphone. But of course, it's up to the landlords of the thrift store. And I guess the Hope Center, the Shelter Society, and BC Housing would be the landlord in that case. So I'll report back on this.
Well, thank you for your research. I'm not sure about this particular phone. I'm just thinking of the last time I went to use a payphone, my only option was that it would automatically call 911. And I'm like, this isn't helping with the problem. I'm locked out of, I locked myself. I was working downtown and locked myself and all of my purse, my phone, my keys in my office, of course. And so I was trying to phone somebody in the building to let me out. So then I'm like, oh, I can use a payphone, but then I couldn't because it would automatically dial 911. So I ended up, business owner helped me out on there. So that's where I don't know that if that phone only did that, if it had a direct phone tonight, if it was programmed in that way, in which case it might not be useful to either of those entities if that is the way, in fact, it's structured.
Well, I checked the one at PharmaSave.
Okay.
And it was actually operating, which is surprise. Yeah, it actually works. And you can dial local or long distance.
So that's hence the calling
Yeah.
card. Okay, Counselor McMath?
I just have a question through yourself to Councillor Bateman. Are you looking to keep this payphone, or where are we going with this? Like,
Well, I'd like to find out more from Telus about the process of installing a payphone somewhere in Sooke, and then do some groundwork to see if we can find location for it.
okay, one of the questions, if you could put it in your email as far as stats goes, is how many times are those phones, including the one in Port Renfrew, abused?
Right.
Because I work in emergency services, so when someone calls 911 from one of those phones, it's treated as a landline. So the police are mandated to respond to it. And as a community that has really slim resources, that pulls our CMP officers out of Sooke all the way to Port Renfrew, because they are mandated to investigate it. So I would look for those stats as well. Most of the local businesses have landlines, and most of the homeless population also has access to cell phones as well.
Counselor St. Pierre?
Yeah, I was going to comment in a similar way. I suspect that community with a big heart, we've got a lot of people with cell phones. If you're really in dire straits, you could probably ask someone if you could use a phone. But I really like the idea that areas like, or places like, I believe Sea Park may actually have a phone as well, by the way. I'm not sure, but I think it's actually available. So I think there are a number of locations where phones are available for free, as opposed to even a payphone. And I realize that wouldn't be at all hours of the night, but it seems like in this new millennium, the payphone may have had its day as a more useful sort of thing. But that's just a thought.
No, for me, I'm wearing my hat as the Sooke with the Sooke Homelessness Coalition, right? And the fact that we do have a homeless population. We also have a affordability crisis, and people are increasingly challenged, as Mr. Rasimas told me. They're challenged to pay a $50 a month cell phone bill. So I think maybe payphones have a future, not in Sooke.
Well, we look forward to seeing.
Yeah, we'll see what comes. of it.
what you
But
come
thank you,
up,
Councillor McMath, for that.
And thank you
Important
for,
point.
thank you for looking into it. It is sort of a sign of the times. I think of some of the hotels that had dedicated space off of a lobby where there's little cubbies where you could sit and make a phone call and there's like a little shelf where the phone book would be, like, remember the phone book and how,
No.
Gosh.
like now, like the only useful one is the one that the Lions provides, is the other ones are, you know, and then you don't have everyone that's listed by cell phone, but you'd see these spaces in some of the older hotels that still exist to the day. And now there's often the odd person on a cell phone in the space just to kind of get out of the way, or that's what I was doing. But it's like, what is this place? Oh, right, it used to have a lot of phones in here. So we'll see what happens. At first, when I thought of this, I was thinking of the one at the Evergreen Mall that was outside the liquor store. So obviously that phone has long since disappeared, and this is the one remaining. It was right on, I just kind of remember it on the wall, but I think it was vandalism or it kept getting broken or whatever. Or it's just not there anymore. Interesting. Okay. So for now, we'll receive for information, please. Moved by Councillor McMath and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, council verbal reports. Councillor Bedos, go ahead.
Yeah, just an update on Canada Day. I'm happy to say with great arm twisting and crying and moaning, I have the Rotary Club on board.
Yay.
They're going to help us. No, their president met with us on Sunday and they're very happy to be part of the process. So, and I talked to the chamber today. Chamber of Commerce wants on board the committee and they will look after all the vendors for us. So it is becoming a community event once again. I don't know what, did I tell you last time we're having 3 logging shows? We're going to I'm looking to get a magician between one and a music bingo between the other. No bands, just not enough time for them. So it's coming together slowly.
Music bingo.
Oh, it's
Oh,
fantastic.
it's fun. It just depends on the decade.
Yeah. We go to 17 Mile lot and every weekend actually. And if they do the 50s and 60s, they were pretty good at it, but the 80s and 90s, not so good.
You could do some karaoke. That could be some good, potentially
The
good
last time we
music.
had Canada Day and we had music bingo, it was very, very popular. If you get an opportunity to try it, it's fun.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Bedos, for your work there. Councillor Lajeunesse, is that your hand going up?
I don't know, it's just holding my head up. I attended the SIP, South Island Prosperity Partnership Municipal Partners meeting last week. And a few things came up, and one was that they completed a survey of 500 or so businesses in the region. And one of the things that came out of that was that doctors are facing the same kind of challenges that retail spaces are with respect to high lease rates, et cetera. And that there's a lack of light industrial space in the region. There are companies looking for industrial space on which to situate themselves. And I think there could be some opportunity there for Sooke. And aside from that, Councillor Bedos will be happy to know that I took out 3 trees this weekend and I planted 10 to replace them. So, and that's about it.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Councillor Bateman.
Okay, so I attended the CRD board meeting last week on the mayor's behalf, and I guess one of the items was the Regional Parks Compliance and Enforcement Program, which is interesting, right? We've had this discussion around dogs on and off leash. And, you know, the CRD's approach is to issue written warnings and only then issue a ticket. So we don't have any numbers on the Goose and our Sooke area CRD parks, but there were only 4 dog off leash tickets written in all of last year. And one dog not under control. So it looks like our dog owners are doing the right things, you know. Come Fido, demonstrate you can do that, and you'll be sent on your way with a smile. The big issues in the parks are illegal parking, failure to obey signs, consumption of liquor. There were 29 tickets for that, and people camping in the park system. So also at that same meeting, the CRD will be doing what Sooke is already doing, which is developing policies regarding socially and environmentally responsible investing. And they'll be presenting some material for member local governments on that subject. And the CRD is also going to be reaching out to the Ukrainian Cultural Center to see what tangible actions the board can take in supporting the Ukrainian people, particularly Ukrainians living in the CRD. So on another subject, the library opening, which was set for 2 Saturdays from now, is canceled due to the strike action, and it will be rescheduled in late April. And on the subject of that strike, the Viral trustees will be meeting on Friday to hear the latest of the negotiations. 12% of Viral staff are members of the BC Government Employees Union, and that's 42 employees, and I think there are 2 in Sooke. And I don't believe we've had pickets in Sooke yet. They started in Cowichan last week and Nanaimo on the weekend, and I don't know what the latest is. But it's the CRD also is entering CUPE negotiations right now, and it's an interesting time for unions, because with all this inflation and the new work from home policies, you know, there's a lot more material in the hopper for these negotiators. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Any other reports from members of council? One I'll share is just a proclamation on Wolf Awareness Day that will go out on March 24th. Some of you may know of Takea, the famous sea wolf that survived 8 years alone on Discovery Island off of Oak Bay, and initially identified as a lost dog, maybe left behind. They determined it was a sea wolf and wondered how long it would live there, but uniquely found its way of survival. So it allowed many to actually study sea wolves, and the study of sea wolves has really only started in 1997. Sadly, Takea did leave the island and swam over to James Bay, and he was captured and then relocated to Port Renfrew, where he was released and sadly killed because he's a wolf. And so that happened tragically on March the 24th. So, however, on this island, he was observed digging for water, diving and eating scallops and shellfish and the like. And so there's been he provided a lot of research into where we are. And I raise this because we were aware around last year, the year before, several of our wolves were shot and, well, maybe not shot, but were killed by a trophy hunter. And through that have learned that wolves are treated under the legislation no differently than vermin. So rats, mice, wolves, all in the same, all treated the same under the law. So there has been a bit of movement that they are keystone predator. We do have wolves that we coexist with. I think they largely ignore us because they know that humans are dangerous, and they live outside our community, live in and out of our community. And I feel they require protection like a bear or a cougar, and we have the ability to learn and to coexist together. So myself and a few others are just trying to do what we can just to raise the awareness that wolves are not vermin. And just their impact on the ecosystem it's interesting. I've read even that when they fish for salmon, they'll only eat the head of the salmon. They'll leave the rest. I think it's just whatever the brain matter or whatever is in the fish is all they need for survival. And of course, the rest of it feeds many other creatures in many other ways, but it's part of the cycle. And that's how they hunt. At first there was that, well, they only just survive off of deer, but there's no deer on Discovery Island. And Takea has proven that they survive differently. I've also learned that they can swim for up to 20 kilometers. So that's how they go through the archipelago, by swimming with only their snout and their eyes visible. So imagine that if you're just bird watching, you see something moving closely, and that's where sometimes biologists have spotted them in that way, and just how they move about. So some local residents have shared some amazing just footage that they've captured through, and of course, technology with game cameras. We're learning a lot about how we share the streets and who visits us. You know, you hear many different stories now with different cameras that residents have, and what's moving outside, and then the bears and all the different animals that we share. And we've just always coexisted together. So that's something that's coming out next week. Chief Planis and the Sooke are aware of this and support the proclamation. And then the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, UBCIC, has also endorsed the resolution and have added a piece to the proclamation as well. So anyway, that'll go out. So I just wanted to share with you that that is March 24th. And other than that, it's just been busy because moving's fun. So I've just been focused on packing up my father's house and getting that all ready. So just a lesson. And if you have hobbies, think about what you keep. All of us, think about what you keep and how you store it and what you do with it, because what you think you might need tomorrow, maybe you never will. So just some free advice. Those wowzers. Okay, so on that note, motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? That's unanimous. And thank you to our member of the public for joining with us tonight. And for those of you attending virtually, wonderful to see you. Take good care.